Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have my August TBR. So in July, I actually for the most part stuck to my TBR, apart from getting ill and throwing some books off it, because after my July TBR video, I asked whether anyone thought I should forego certain books, and whenever somebody told me just to get rid of it, that's what I did. So we lost Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami, which the only part that I'm sad about there is that that was gifted to me by Emily of Novell Novels, but she's sent me so many books in the past that really I think that she can hopefully accept me getting rid of this one. Then Streets of Laredo. Something happened in that Larry McMurtry book that made me take every single one of his books off my shelves and donate them to the charity shop. And there was a moment of regret there because, well, Lonesome Dove is one of my favourite books, and I thought maybe I should have held on to that one. And then as soon as it went on the shelf at work, it seemed like it went. And so the moment of regret really had no time to last. And I suppose that if I ever want to reread it in future, I can just go and buy another copy. So that was it for the July TBR. Really, I don't know whether I'm going to continue with No Love Lost by Rachel Ingalls. I read one story in there, and every time I went back to the next novella that I had to read, it was just a slog. I really didn't want to be doing that. And I think that maybe I don't get on with that writer's writing style, and that's perfectly okay. So that might be the next casualty from my shelves. But one book that has survived the cull is Fall of the Argosi by Sebastien de Castell, and that is the first book from July that is being carried over into my August TBR. And I am still currently reading The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery Hurst by our very own Katy Lumsden. 150 pages into this now, very much enjoying it, and have said that I'd actually love to see this serialised on the radio. If you have been following this channel at all this year, then you will know that I have finally read all of Elizabeth Taylor's novels, and so my next project is to read all of her short stories. I originally said that I was going to read each collection as it comes in this book, but that's not possible because I haven't been able to find out which short stories belonged to which collection. Some of these stories weren't included in collections, they were only available from magazines, and sometimes collections repeated the same story in each volume. Therefore, I have divided this book up into 5 parts, and I will be reading the first 130 pages, I think it works out to, in August. And I'm looking forward to this because of the fact that I've said in Elizabeth Taylor's novels, she'll often have short asides and vignettes of different characters, and I want to see whether we get something like that, a very masterful character study in her short stories. Also, because one of my goals is to read more Anthony Trollope and get to having read 10 Anthony Trollopes by the end of the year, and that means I need to read another 3 before the end of the year. And so for August, I have chosen The Vicar of Bullhampton. I did a first line battle between 10 Anthony Trollopes from my shelves, and this is the one that won out. I very much liked the tone of voice that Trollope started with in this one, and I'd heard good things about it, so I'm looking forward to getting to this one at some point in the month. And then for the entirety of the year, Charlie and I have said that we would buddy read Juja by Nino Haratschwili and translated by Ruth Martin in August. And shall we read the blurb together of this one? Because all I can remember about this book is Charlie told me to get it and we'd buddy read it at some point. We both really liked The Eighth Life, but I DNF'd my soul twin. I might go back to it one day. It is supposedly a retelling of Wuthering Heights, and I've never been a fan of that story, so I don't think that I was ever going to be a fan of my soul twin. I did like the writing, and the translator did a fantastic job, and it was pacey, but there was just stuff going on in there that was frustrating to me. Anyway, the blurb of this one reads: In 1953, a teenage girl, Jean Serret, jumps in front of a train at the Gare du Nord station. She leaves behind writings that to some are unreadable, but to others tell universal unspoken truths about the lives and struggles of women. When published in the 1970s, her work triggers a rash of copycat suicides. It is hastily withdrawn from sale and eventually forgotten about. Then in 2004, two women from opposite sides of the globe, Amsterdam and Sydney, rediscovered Jean Serre's book and set out to discover who the author was and what happened to her. Women across the ages have attached their own stories to Serre's, often with devastating results, but the truth about her may be even stranger than the fictions they have invented. So this book was originally published in 2010 but wasn't translated until last year. That sounds like a very intriguing blurb indeed. From there, I've put Outrageous by Paul Baker, the story of Section 28 and Britain's battle for LGBT education. I'm down to the last 15 books unread from my shelves pre-birthday, and so a lot of them that are left over have ended up on this list because I like to have 10 per month, and I created a new TBR, and I didn't know I would be carrying over a few from July. So I really enjoyed Paul Baker's first book. The only reason that I've been reticent to pick this one up is because of it talking about Section 28, and I know how harmful that has been to people throughout the last 30 years. And sometimes I think that Britain is headed back towards that in certain cases. And so the worry and fear are strong with this one. I know Paul Baker can write. I'm looking forward to it, and I want to read his other book, Camp, after this. But yeah, that's the only reason that I haven't got to this one yet. Then I have The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet by David Mitchell. Again, this is on this list because I am at the last 15 books and I was picking between which David Mitchell I wanted to read this month. There are quite a few hefty tomes on this month's TBR, and I'm not sure that I'm going to get to all of them, despite having a bit of time off in the middle of the month. I also have plans to try and focus heavily on something that I want to get written. I have enjoyed the majority of the David Mitchell that I've read in the past, so I'm looking forward to this one. Then I have Our Friends in Berlin by Anthony Quinn, and I didn't read London Burning a few months ago when I put it on a TBR, but I have since lent that book to one of my volunteers who's got into Anthony Quinn this year. And so I've picked the next one off my shelves to read. And this one is set in London 1941. And the Blitz has united the nation, but there is an enemy hiding in plain sight. A group of British citizens is gathering secret information to aid Hitler's war machine. Jack Hurst has become entangled in this treachery, but he also has a particular mission: to locate the most dangerous Nazi agent in the country. He soon receives a promising lead. Amy Strellan, who works in a Mayfair marriage bureau, was once close to this elusive figure. Her life is a world away from the machinations of Nazi sympathisers, yet when Hurst pays a visit to Amy's office, everything changes in a heartbeat. That sounds somewhat different for the Anthony Quinn that I have read in the past. I've read Freya and Eureka. Now, my volunteer has only got London's Burning and Eureka to read now, but she really rated this book, so I'm looking forward to it. Then we have Remainders of the Day by Shaun Bythell, which is another of his diaries from his bookshop in Wigtown. I read the first month of this way back in January when I planned on reading this, because I read 84 Charing Cross Road as part of the Read Along with Sarah of Hardcover Hearts and wanted to read another bookish book, but time got away from me and I kept putting this one down, and then I just put it back on my shelves, but I'm hoping to get it done in August. Then we have The Three Dahlias by Katy Watson. I didn't know about this book until last year when the sequel came out, and Charlie saw it at a charity shop and sent it my way. So there are three women who have portrayed this fictional detective, Dahlia. What it says on the back is, three rival actresses team up to solve a murder at the stately home of Lettice Davenport, the author whose sleuthing creation of the 1930s, Dahlia Lively, had made each of them famous to a new generation. Previously, I thought this book was set back in the 1930s, but I'm now thinking it's set in the modern day. But once again, we will see. I am already thinking that it might be somewhat similar to The Marlowe Murder Club by Robert Thorogood, so I am hopeful that I'm going to like it. I do tend to go towards a cosy crime style book in the summer months, and that's when I read most of my crime novels. I think it's a nostalgic thing of going around to my grandparents' house in my childhood, and whenever I went around in summer, they always had some sort of Miss Marple on. As I say, At Bertram's Hotel is one of my favourite books, simply because of all the nostalgia it holds from it constantly being on the telly as a child. And then we have a book I'm really reticent about, and that is Will You Read This Please, which is edited by Joanna Cannon. 12 writers have been tasked with telling 12 stories of people who were having mental health struggles, and this is to shine a light on the issue going throughout England, I believe. And Joanna Cannon previously worked on a psychiatric ward. It's something that she's regularly talked about and raised awareness for outside of her fiction. As important as this is to discuss, I'm not sure whether it's going to be a book that suits my sensibilities. I think that I might find it a very difficult read, but then part of me thinks that I ought to challenge myself and I ought to read these stories. I was sent this book free, but there's just a tendency towards reticence when it comes to this book because of the topics that it's tackling. Then we have A Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami, translated by Alfred Birnbaum. Now, I've heard that this is part of the Rat trilogy. Indeed, I've heard that it's the final part of that. But ever since I discovered this book, I have wanted to read it simply because it mentions sheep. And for whatever reason, being the child of a sheep farmer always pulls me towards these books about sheep that I never end up reading. Anyway, the blurb of this book reads, "The man was leading an aimless life, time passing one big blank. His girlfriend has perfectly formed ears with the power to bewitch, marvels of creation. The man receives a letter from a friend enclosing a seemingly innocent photograph of sheep and a request, place the photograph somewhere it will be seen. Then one September afternoon, the phone rings and the adventure begins. Welcome to the Wild Sheep Chase." Here, it was basically a choice between this and 1Q84, and given the number of big books that are already on my TBR this month, I chose to prioritise this one. I have been hit and miss with Haruki Murakami's work in the past. Sometimes he does the surreal and the magical and the mysticism stuff that I quite like and appreciate, and then sometimes it just goes over my head, and I don't think I'm ever going to forgive him for the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. And some of my friends know about how much that book affected me because they still bring it up to me. I do think I buddy read that one with Dane as well. Them's the books. It's quite a hefty TBR, quite a hopeful one. Are we actually going to achieve this? Are we going to read any of these books? I suppose we will find out in the next 31 days. If you've read any of these books and think that I should prioritise them over others, then please let me know in the comments. What is your summer reading list looking like? I hope that you have enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.